Hi, welcome to the Mindset. Christopher Feltner here. This is episode number 23, and we have a special guest for a special episode. So, as I'm sure a lot of you who tune into the podcast know, this is Mental Health Awareness Month. So, with it, what better guest than a clinical administrator to talk to us here at one of our programs at Grafton. So, welcome.
Thanks.
I feel like it's literally been years since you and me have like really talked.
Yeah, probably.
Because I know you were in town for a clinical day or something at our office, and it was just like a, hey, how are you? And then
Yeah,
now here we are having a podcast.
I know.
So,
I like it.
all right. So if you would, just to start, tell us who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm Stefanee Lambert. I am the clinical administrator for the Richmond region of Grafton. I supervise the clinical team, which includes mental health therapists, the ABA department, OT, speech, and we now have a music therapist. So I have him too.
Great.
Yep. So I support those therapists in being able to deliver services to our clients who are in our care residentially and through day school, and help to make sure that the services that are needed for the clients are able to be accessed, and that the clinicians are able to deliver the best services possible and learn and grow as clinicians themselves as well.
Great. Now, you mentioned you all have a music therapist now. Did you happen to see the last podcast episode we did with Milo?
No, but I saw it was Milo.
Yeah. Yeah, he actually was able to come in here to the studio, and we sat down and gabbed for a while about everything music therapy. So
That's awesome.
that was really cool.
Yeah, I asked our music therapist yesterday. I said, so you play music in your free time too? He said, yeah, so this job is great. And I was just astonished. He's like living the dream. I
Right,
love it.
right. Yeah, Milo's the same way.
Yeah.
Like he plays gigs and stuff as well. And of course, when I first met him before we did the podcast, he toured me around his music therapy space, and then we shot the breeze about all the different types of music both of us have played over the years. So it was cool. More commonalities than people probably would have guessed. So.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Except for noise. No noise.
I was going to say the noise music. Yeah. I didn't know if he was into it. I'm still intrigued by it.
You're one of the few in my life. So let's kind of go back to the beginning. What made you, like when you were looking at what to major in, fields to go into, why mental behavior health? Like what drew you to this field?
So I actually, where do I start? I guess I grew up with my best friend since kindergarten. Her parents are both in the mental health field, and actually work with the IDD population. So I had grown up kind of around some of the clients that they had worked with, especially since they were in adult services, so there was more integration in the community and us supporting like delivering Christmas gifts and stuff, which was always fun at like midnight on Christmas. And I kind of had made the decision that I wouldn't work with this population or in this field. And I was going to do like biology or nutrition or something. But I took a turn and decided that I did want to do some psychology because I like the idea of understanding people and their behavior and their choices and like their mindset of why they do certain things. So then I had it set that I was going to be able to work with the prison system and support men in the prison system who had done like significant acts of harm or something like that to people, to be able to help deliver mental services to them. I also had a very strong interest, and I still do, in being able to provide mental health services to child actors. I think that's a really cool little niche that doesn't get addressed.
Yeah.
But then I ended up in the child abuse and neglect class, which sounds crazy that I really enjoyed it, but I enjoyed it because I connected with the desire to want to help those who are most vulnerable, and understanding that children in a family are part of a system. And that system also has challenges that need to be worked through and supported. And where were they not supported, or what environmental factors contributed to the way that they are engaging with their kids, whether positively or negatively. So from child abuse and neglect class, I actually was encouraged to go down the path of children psychology. And then I had a professor who encouraged me to go to social work. So I went and did my master's of social work. And while I was in that, I stumbled upon applied behavior analysis at the very end of my schooling. So I had just spent a lot of my internships working with kids in home, and I always ended up being able to work with some of the kids who had dual diagnoses, autism, intellectual disability. And I just kind of kept going from there. I really enjoyed that combination of behavioral work with mental health. And yeah, I just continued down that path. And then I also just finished my master's in applied behavior analysis in 2024. So tried to circle it all back around. So I have both.
And who carried champion.
And who chair champion.
And who
That's
carried
right.
champion. That's the most important degree right there.
Exactly. Yeah. That
So
one came from staff.
Forget those other certificates. That's one you put on the wall.
That's right. That's right.
Right. You know, you're probably the first person I've talked about that, or I've talked to therapists, anything in clinical, that has ever mentioned being fascinated of the idea of working with former child actors.
Really? I think it's
Yeah.
such a cool, I mean, obviously there's awful things that they can go through and experience, but just being able to do some of the front end work to support them in processing the different lifestyle that they have than everybody else. And again, that's another point of environment plus mental health and how it is, grows or is hindered in a certain environment. I just think it's a really cool, little area.
So what do you think so many former child actors have had challenges with mental health and well-being?
Being put into the situations of adults with a child mindset. I think the amount of fame, money, and just a completely different day-to-day than what typical kids go through. And then there's that other factor of how they fit in their family system where they become the breadwinner. Is just a very different role in the family to play. So I think a lot of it depends on how the system around them supports them and interacts with them and talks to them about who they are and why they're doing certain things. If it's a job or if it's a interest, I think that makes a different effect on the kid too. Yeah.
Very cool.
Still interested in it.
Yeah.
Clearly.
And it's funny because when you said it, the first thing that popped in my head was videos of performance of Corey Feldman.
Oh, yeah.
And how some people are like, is it a gag? Like, is this a gimmick? Or, is this a result of something to do with growing up a child actor that's caused something? And I don't know.
Yeah. It's always hard because
fascinating,
it's like, are they acting or is that really what they're going through? And if they're good actors, it's hard to tell. But that happens with people with mental health too, is it something that's related to their mental health or is it something that they're choosing to do and they have will to do because they like to upset other people or they like to make things difficult for other people,
I mean, I'm sure there's not a single online influencer that acts, that everybody's genuine all the time.
Oh yeah, 1,000%.
Right?
Yeah. Genuine and vulnerable all the time.
That's right. So you get into this field. Was it what you expected?
Yes. It was kind of what I expected, just in the sense that I mean, so my experience of being with the population of intellectual disability, adults with intellectual disability when I was younger, kind of prepared me to know kind of how, typical interactions would go on a day-to-day basis. And then my interest in being able to support those who really have those bigger behavioral challenges and be able to help them feel successful and to, contact their environment more safely and strengthen those relationships with those around them. I think it kind of fit exactly what I was hoping it would be, which was that blend of mental and behavioral, which was hard to find. And then of course the piece that you get told in grad school, but you don't really get confronted with until you actually are working in the field is the interactions with the systems within mental health. That I'd say was probably the thing that struck me the most in a surprising way, because I was actually being faced with the challenges of funding versus availability of services and supports, and people's
Mm-hmm.
motivation to engage in the services and supports that are available to them,
Mm-hmm.
and people not being, CSBs or local FAPs not being able to fund supports for the parents to get them to the services.
Mm-hmm.
And just all of those systems sometimes working together, but a lot of the times accidentally bumping into each other because they have their own either pocket of funds to protect so that they can use it in other ways, or an overwhelmed system of the number of people that need help, and they have to triage through who needs help right now,
Mm-hmm.
which of course never lends to a preventative healthcare system. That's always reactive
Yeah.
healthcare system. But that probably was the one thing that I can't say I fully expected, but of course, when you're new to the field, you can't fully expect anything with that. You have to just kind of go through it.
Now we're going to hit on a lot of different things, but I was kind of curious. I just want to kind of ask this since we're talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
You've been in this field since when?
2016.
So you're coming up close to what, 10 years?
Mm-hmm. I
Yes.
done it all at Grafton since.
That's sad. I said I had a question that. I'm like, damn, I can't even think of 10 years. So, but what has kept you in this field that often drives a lot of people out?
I mean, always, and people say it all the time, but it really is the clients and the kids that we serve.
Mm-hmm.
There's just something really special about being able to make a connection with a lot of these kids who oftentimes get overlooked or wrongly categorized as not wanting to or able to build a connection with others. So they're just, some of them, they're just really cool people to connect with. And they make your day interesting. No day is the same for the whole 10 years almost. Also, the families, I know sometimes it can be a challenge to figure out how to balance the needs of the client with the family and the stakeholders. But being able to help a family feel like someone gets it, and that what they're going through isn't something to be judged or looked down on. It's something to be just seen at face value for what it is. And now we're going to figure out what we can do to help you. Even if it's just understanding, yeah, I know that must be really hard. And of course, there is not the support to be able to help with that. But sitting in the moment with them, and the family therapy aspect, I think, is something that I really enjoy that we offer here, to be able to get a little bit deeper with the family, and learn about the history and kind of help them therapeutically work through their past, and uncover pieces to it that they didn't realize they needed to process a little bit more, especially for those residential kiddos that we have. But I will say the bigger item that I know our team here has talked about, which I really think is a true piece to what keeps you in this field, is your team.
Yeah.
The team around you that you get to spend every day with, and make those connections with the kids together and support the families together and work through the challenges together. If you got a team that has a really good sense of humor, a really good, strong background in the areas that they work, and you're all just able to kind of communicate openly and freely and solve problems, it's fun.
Yeah.
Even the most difficult pieces to it is fun, which is what you want work to be. So,
Right.
yeah.
Cool. So in thinking about, mental health, talking about mental health awareness, I was like, I wonder if if you say, what is mental health, if everyone would have the same definition. So I looked up on the World Health Organization's definition. They define it as mental health is a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn well and work well, and contribute to their community. Then I got thinking about the services that we provide at Grafton. I'm like, well, that's the job. In a lot of ways, that's the job, right? Now, Mental Health Awareness Month, it started as a national movement in 1949, which kind of surprised me. 1949 is when this first started as like an awareness month.
Right.
So I was like, what all was going on in 1949? So here's just a handful of things I found. So NATO was formed. People's Republic of China was established. Germany became politically divided between East and West. Soviet Union tests the first atomic bomb. Just a couple things, just a couple.
No biggies.
Now, some other cultural events. The first television broadcast of a presidential inauguration happened here. The first rock and roll record by Gory Carter was recorded. And perhaps the most profound is the first international pancake race took place.
That was the turning point.
Now, is that where all of this came from? It was pancakes.
Pancake race.
Someone got too lazy to make bread, and they're like, "Yeah, pancake."
Yep,
and it's been downhill since. Right? Don't even get us started on syrup. So.
That's right.
So, I looked further, and I was like, "All right, so there are some defined key aspects of this month, right? Raising awareness, reducing stigma, promoting support, advocacy, and celebrating recovery, right? So, looking at the awareness part. And I guess this is what surprised me so much, thinking about this all started up in 1949. I feel like the acknowledgement and more acceptance in all of mental health challenges has been more of like a current modern times thing. Like I can't remember any time, even through high school, I'm 46, even through high school, I graduated in 1996. I don't remember, like outside of you would hear occasionally about depression or that suicide would happen. But as far as like the different anxiety disorders and so much further RADs and everything else, like you just did not hear about that, outside of being in the field.
Right.
And even within our field, more and more diagnoses have developed and been established. So with that, I mean, why does it feel like discussions and acknowledgement have gained steam more in recent times versus in the past, do you think?
Well, I think anything about mental health, especially the awareness to it, is almost like a interesting like layer, because in order to be aware of your mental health, you have to have mental health, right? Like it's all centered around your brain and the way that you are able to have awareness in what you're thinking, feeling, and doing. Yep. So that's why also I do think that the mental and behavioral health component together is so important, because behavioral health also talks about your contact with your environment in very like specific terms of what is happening in your environment that is encouraging your behaviors to go in a certain way. And when your behaviors go in a certain way, your mindset can go in a certain way, or the way that you're thinking and feeling about that behavior or that environment. So when I think about awareness and the history of mental health, I know that there is also stigma around mental health and stigma around like it was taboo to speak about your mental health. And I think when you talk about mental health, I mean, even the definition that you read, mental health is a goal. Mental health is not the current state that most people are in when they're acknowledging that they need supports, right? They're in a mentally unhealthy space. So being able to claim something as not being mentally well, especially when it's something that can't be seen by others necessarily, I think the judgment that others cast upon people's behaviors and thoughts and feelings make it difficult for mental health awareness to be able to be promoted. And I do think that with each generation, what's the saying, that each generation is supposed to do better and surpass the past generation. I think that with the social media craze, it's kind of had a twofold impact on mental health in a positive and a negative way. It created community for people who didn't have the ability to connect with someone else who was going through something similar to what they were, or had those invisible to other people feelings or thoughts that they felt shame for, and shame makes them kind of come in on themselves and not share with others. So it created safe environments for people to be able to talk about it. But it also created a lot of additional mental health variables that people didn't have to deal with, like being faced with day-to-day reminders of some of the tragedies that are happening in the world, or even just being day-to-day reminded that you are not the same as someone else, and you make those social comparisons, and social comparisons can have a negative impact on you because it's not something that you feel like you have control over, can do anything about.
Hmm.
So I think that there's a lot of factors for in the way that each generation deals with mental health, but I do think that this most recent generation has come past the stigma with mental health and is kind of taking ownership over the fact that there are certain times where my mental health is not healthy. Like I am
Hmm.
not in a healthy space mentally, and I
Hmm.
need to take care for that just like I do my body.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that the ease with which they can access and talk about those things because of the technology that's available, probably made it a little bit less taboo to talk about.
Hmm.
Um, and just something that's, a topic of discussion that they want to speak on.
Hmm.
Now, the other unfortunate piece is that sometimes, and that just becomes a craze, so
Yeah.
people want to claim that they have mental health challenges or barriers when they may actually not. And that's just doing harm to the field and to those who are actually going through it because it's creating a
Hmm.
lot of misinformation.
Yeah.
Um, so the internet's a complex place.
Hmm.
I have lots of thoughts and feelings about the internet.
Oh yeah. I mean, I just recently got on social media for the first time, and I don't even know. It's been close to 10 years.
Wow.
So I got rid of Facebook. For some reason, believed that Instagram was going to be better.
I believe the same thing, and then I fall into the trap every time of, man, I got to close Instagram too because it's got me thinking in a negative space.
Well, it's funny you say that because I like it because, I can post pictures. I follow like bands or athletes or like select people, just to kind of keep up. Um, but then I made the mistake of clicking on the Reels button.
Yep.
And the ones where they'll show like someone making a video and then like the comments,
Yep.
I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I guess in my mind what surprised me is I wouldn't think that that stuff would be allowed, much less as widespread as it is. It's not just Instagram, um, watching a relative watch YouTube shorts that kids watch these days.
Yep.
It's some of the stuff that's on there. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
I wouldn't think that this stuff would be allowed because, I feel like back in the day when I was on Facebook, like people got banned quick for like simple things, so, but I just think about how even watching that stuff can affect your humor and make you feel more critical of things and just think about how much earlier people are exposed to that stuff,
Right.
like widespread, just to impact. And I'll, and in a way, it makes me think of similar correlation to former child actors.
Mhm.
Too much too soon, in that world. So
Yep, and not enough to protect them and build up their coping strategies and
yeah,
abilities to understand why people do what they do or, that what other people say isn't always true, and that's a hard
yeah,
concept to build, especially for a kid, is if someone's telling me something, there must be something to it.
right,
Um, and it's an adult skill and one that we all work on all the time to acknowledge what feedback in our world we need to integrate and what feedback we need to just acknowledge and say, "I appreciate it, but I'm actually not gonna take that," you know?
yeah, yep.
Mhm.
Now with also with stigma, I feel like there's still a pretty big stigma against providers.
Mm.
There's a lot of people, and there's groups and stuff, and the problem is it's kind of like some of what you were just talking about. There are some providers, unfortunately, who have been found were doing very abusive, harsh things.
Right.
But then sometimes there's very good providers where a staff does something, someone gets through the process, kind of gets their way in. They didn't have anything on their background, and like it's hard to prevent. But for you, have you found or have you experienced much stigma from folks outside of the field when they hear about where you work or the type of field you're in?
Um, yeah, I think people's usual response to when you say you work in this kind of
Hmm.
setting is um almost like they sometimes ingenuinely say, "Oh my gosh, you're such a saint," or "Oh my gosh, you're so great to work with," those kids and those families. And um, I don't remember the last time someone told me they worked in finance, and I said, "Oh, you're so great to to deal with those hedge fund workers and those clients in there."
It's tough handling all those Franklins.
Exactly. You're so good at the counting of the money. I can't believe it.
Right.
But I think that's usually the first response that I get is just the thought of like the Mother Teresa moment of how good you must be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that also is interesting because there can be, negative things that occur in this kind of setting because
Mm-hmm.
we're also people working with people.
Yep.
Right. And I think along the lines of what we were talking about too, with the growth of technology, a lot of what technology's goal in working fields is to take away some of that um, variability in how things can, be done, right? It's supposed to
Mm-hmm.
create more of a sameness or to take away some of the errors that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't do that in our field. We can't take away
Yeah.
the people caring for people. We
Yeah.
can't turn off the kids and say, well, we didn't, have anybody to work tonight. So I think one of the biggest things that people don't understand when they're talking through it is, or, when I tell people the field that I work in, is again, the layers to it and the
Mm-hmm.
system. It's not just me sitting in a room talking with a kid or a family,
Right.
it's supporting the system and the programs that go into being able to do around the clock care for some of the more challenging behaviors and the emotions that come with those
Mm-hmm.
behaviors from both the kid and the family, but also the staff members who care about that client and have a hard time seeing them have a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, there's just mental health supports that need to be wrapped around all of the humans that
Right.
work in this field because everybody has mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it needs to be promoted and seen for what it is, and that there's no difference between the need for mental health support for somebody who works with challenging
Mm-hmm.
behaviors and the parents who care for the challenging behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
There's different levels of support needed, but there's definitely still support because we're still humans.
Mm-hmm.
So we're subject to emotions and feelings and uh, mistakes and impulses and things like that.
Absolutely.
So
So, kind of piggybacking off of that, that's perfect segue into what I was going to ask next.
perfect.
Working with both staff, individuals, and families, right? How do you see secondary or vicarious traumatization happen? Like, how does that happen to folks?
So I actually saw something very interesting on, I don't know if it was LinkedIn or another podcast that I listened to, but
Mm-hmm.
it was talking about vicarious trauma and burnout and vicarious trauma in the field, and how sometimes the term vicarious trauma is used to explain away somebody's own feelings and dealings with depression. Because vicarious trauma absolutely can happen. It's just the repeated exposure to some of these challenging histories and stories and being live in person with some of the incidents that can happen with these kids, or hearing a family talk about the challenges they've gone through and the empathy kicks in and you can't help but feel for what they went through or how they must have navigated that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another piece to the just being a human. Humanity causes us to feel vicarious trauma because we can't ultimately turn off our emotions or our empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in the field, as professionals in the field, we have to be able to manage that, because if I am now having an emotional response or reaction, I'm not able to help you through yours. And I chose to have that be my job. That is what I'm supposed to do for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think vicarious trauma is something that we all need to be mindful of. But I think the other thing to be mindful of is the chicken or the egg experience of what came first: the
Yeah.
vicarious trauma that led to feelings of depression, or the depression that, made vicarious trauma feel more like it was something that was happening to
Mm-hmm.
you, um, or anxiety that already existed. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, mental health is it's an onion. There's layers. So I think vicarious trauma is just one of those layers of the onion. But I think that for people who are working in this field that don't have the background of mental health awareness, and the training that, the clinicians go through, to be able to acknowledge and work through those
Mm-hmm.
feelings and experiences. They are more subject to, I think, vicarious trauma because they're not really aware of the
Mm-hmm.
fact that it can come from spending time with the clients that they care about most, or just showing up for them every day,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I think I see it happening across all people who work in this field, but I also can see how sometimes that's not the factor that's at play.
Yeah.
It's just the factor that was the easiest thing to point out or to blame for some of the feelings that people are going through.
So, as a clinician, what are some ways that you think that either workers in our field or families with loved ones who deal with a lot of challenges, what are some steps they could take to try to, I guess, prevent that vicarious traumatization?
Um, I think that support systems are always the first thing that I think of.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Part of that I'll blame on my social work history, right? Because we always got to think in systems.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think that systems of support are huge. And support doesn't just mean that there is a person. You have to be picky about your support,
Mm-hmm.
which is another piece that the internet has been able to provide, is being able to find appropriate supports.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but finding support that will help acknowledge what you're feeling and going through, while
Mm-hmm.
also not demonizing or um, creating negative feelings and thoughts around what work you're doing or what you have to do, right? So, like, example for direct support staff, being able to have either another staff member, like a good, strong teammate, or somebody that you care about in your personal life who you can go back to and kind of talk through how it was really difficult
Mm-hmm.
that day, or you saw some really difficult things and you're feeling a certain way. You need somebody who's going to be able to support you and your emotion, but also not blame or shame or create any negative feelings or thoughts around the work that you do, because
Mm-hmm.
ultimately that is the work that you do and that is the kid that you serve, right? So you don't need to be encouraged to hate or be upset that the kid did what we know that they were going to do, because that's why that they need to be served and supported.
Mm-hmm.
um, for the family side, I think they need to be able to build up support systems that um, understand what they're going through, even just at a surface level, to join support groups for people who have similar experiences. And I know for our specific population at Grafton, that's really hard for families because they say, yeah, I'll join my local support group for moms for kids with autism.
Right.
But their kid is never doing what our kids are doing. We serve the end of the spectrum that typically has more of those behavioral challenges, and weighs more on the supports that are available for the family until it completely exhausts them.
Mm-hmm.
So I know they oftentimes feel like they're missed in support groups too. But supports, and then also using the services that are available. And that goes also sometimes back to that little bit of stigma that I think everybody who is 25 and older can carry with them,
Mm-hmm.
in the thought that if I talk about my mental health, and that means that somebody might see me as, crazy or vulnerable or weak, instead of being able to just see that you can share it with your local clinical administrator if needed. And it should be judgment-free zone, just a space to be able to talk through, yeah, that really was difficult. And I'm sorry that that's something you went through, and being able to figure out next steps to get past the experience and step into um, your job or your next thing that you have to do for your family, and know that you also have to do those things. You can't
Mm-hmm.
just turn off your responsibilities. Um, so I'd say support systems, appropriate support systems, and the use of services that are available, which, sometimes jumping on Facebook is not the best support that's available, because that can actually hinder your mental health. So also being
Mm-hmm.
aware of what actually helps you feel better and what kind of just turns your brain off and numbs you to what you were feeling, because that's not
Mm-hmm.
what we in the mental health field would promote.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, staying away from the things that negatively affect you, right? Um, I remember talking to a lady who she runs a recovery group out of a church, and she was talking about, journaling and stuff, and a line that she wrote down that has always stuck with her even through adulthood is what you feed grows, what you starve dies. Are you feeding the right things?
Yep.
So I don't know. That's something that's always kind of stuck with me. And if I find myself starting to feel, negative or anxious about something, angry, down, whatever it is, I start thinking of, all right, what am I ingesting?
Hmm.
Is it something I'm reading? Is it something I'm watching? Is it people I'm around? What is it? Because, I can speak for myself. Like I've shrunk my personal circle down considerably for what it was over the years,
Hmm.
just because I've looked at myself and different things that I've been working on and been like, all right, are there people that I surround myself with that do not encourage the right things in me?
Right.
Is there stuff I listen to? Is there stuff I watch? And, that's something anytime I find myself struggling with my personal well being, I look at, all right, what have I been consuming
Right.
lately?
Right. Well, I think people also think about what, especially now where AI or whatever it is
Mm-hmm.
that captures exactly what you're talking about in your environment, they target the ads directly to you.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah,
Siri's
it's
been
creepy.
snitching on me for years.
Right, exactly. Siri's been known for a long time. I don't remember when
That's
she
right.
came about, but she was the
Yeah.
first one to spy. Um, but it's often not taking a look at what you're already doing and making a change, but it's adding something to your regimen.
Mm-hmm.
So people will try to take supplements to be able to feel better,
Mm-hmm.
without also looking at what they're ingesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad you said that when you use the word ingesting, I was thinking that you were just going to go down the path of food and, what you're ingesting to your body, but
Mm-hmm.
not your mind, because your mind is ingesting things as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's what you're, seeing in your environment, how you're feeling about your friendships and your social circles. And no one talks enough when you're in that transitional phase at like 18, 17, 18, about how adult friendships are going to look, because it's
Right.
very different than when you see
Yeah.
your best friend in middle school every single day and you think that's why they're my best friend because I see them every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of adults go through that um, kind of additional identity crisis of who am I as a friend and how am I supposed to have friends if I don't see them every day.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that weighs, I think, on people's mental health too, just generational thing as people get older.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that, the difference when you're in adulthood, what friends look like.
Hmm.
Because I feel like I've gotten pretty good at identifying ones where I'm only going to hear from them digitally.
Right.
That's just how it is. That's where we are at our point in our life. The ones that might occasionally meet up, the ones that it's because I work with them,
Right.
but also being realistic about myself, how, my availability as a friend. Like, I'm not the guy that's going to go hang out every weekend.
Right.
I'm just not. But I've consistently through my life been the guy where if you really struggle with something, you need someone to give you a different perspective, help you through it, support you. Like, I'm your guy,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. Got to redefine yourself as a friend.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so let's go back to the nutritional part. Cause you mentioned that in the beginning, had an interest in nutritional with it. And he's not exactly a celebrity, but he's not completely an influencer. I don't know. He's a gentleman who's like his work is very fascinating, where he's come from and got himself to. Um, but he was talking about, he's super into nutrition, what he does and how it's affected his body, not just physically, but how he's felt mentally different. And he also did an experiment of eating the opposite for like just a month. So for just a month, he would consume more fast food and like trash type of food. And he put on a little bit of weight,
Hmm.
but he documented like his mental struggle through it.
Oh, okay.
some. And, I was just thinking, I feel like we're at a better place in society with therapy.
Hmm.
People acknowledging that and being more willing to do it, myself included. I even went to therapy for a little while and did EMDR, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, see?
Fantastic. Um, I think that there's also obviously a place for medication,
Right.
you know, but I think we overlook a lot of the nutritional aspects. I think that could help as well.
Yeah. I think we also, I mean, I don't know, it's a theme across this podcast today, apparently, but technology and the way that it is targeting ads and stuff, I
Yeah.
also feel like it's a little impossible um, right now in the new digital age that we're in to feel like, oh, okay, this is the path that I need to take to feel well, because
Hmm.
there is so much information and so much. Um, there's also layered consumerism and capitalism around the
Hmm.
mental health field of
Oh yeah.
feeling well or feeling good or being well or being fit. Um, and I think that it's impossible for any just human in, I'd say, America right now, because that's all I can speak on, because that's all I'm in. That's my experience.
Yeah.
To feel successful in any path they take, because there's also always something new that's being advertised or something new that's coming out that's saying, well, what you're doing actually is harming you in this way.
Mm.
So I think another thing that people are going through right now, I know I go through it myself, is the feelings of being overwhelmed by the options
Hmm.
and not knowing which path to take to actually feel well. Um,
Hmm.
and I think the only way to kind of conceptualize and think through that kind of maze of options is to take one step at a time and then be very mindful and reflective of how you actually feel. And again, feedback in the
Hmm.
universe. If there's feedback telling you that this actually is harmful to you now, you need to be taking that just at face value and saying, okay, so this is the information. I need to figure out how I can sit with that information and determine if that's right for me to make a change or not. Because people are also doing a lot more self medication
Yeah.
than going to somebody who is prescribing and following kind of what they learned or were taught can help, and what things interfere with each other. And so I think there's a lot of people who can self medicate and do just fine, but there's also people who
Hmm.
really are not able to take that self medication path um, and stick to one process enough to figure out if it actually made them feel well.
Mm.
So I think the wellness field right now is just kind of confusing and probably adds extra layers of stress to the mental health that people are going through.
Yeah.
Because it is between the food you eat, between the things that you watch on a day-to-day basis, the people you surround yourself with, um, the jobs that you work every day. Every choice is either going to contribute to or take away from your feelings of mental well-being, or like you said, the wolf that you feed,
Hmm.
right? Which one are you feeding with each choice?
Right.
So I think decision fatigue also can come into play for a lot of
Mm.
people.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So for you to kind of finish our talk today, when you find yourself struggling, what are some things that you have found helpful for you?
Um, well, now I have 2 kids under 3, so I'm always struggling. I'm struggling with a lot of things.
Right. Right.
So I do feel like one of the things that has been always helpful for me to remember is that what I'm going through right now is temporary. And I
Hmm.
think that kind of helps set it, maybe bringing it down to a human level of the things
Hmm.
that we go through are temporary. There is a time limit on how long I will feel like this, how long this will be a factor for me. Um, and then also being mindful of the amount, like you said, of energy or time in a day that I actually have.
Hmm.
Um, and feeling okay to say I am a human who has multiple roles.
Hmm.
And every time I add a new role, I don't add hours in a day.
Right.
I also don't become less human because I still need to sleep and do other things.
Yep.
So I think just acknowledging my limitations and reminding myself that it is temporary and I can figure out a solution if I make sure that I'm focusing on a solution that's actually possible and not a solution that I think will get me to a perfect spot.
Hmm.
Because then that feels overwhelming and unattainable because I mean, in my mind, it is.
Yeah.
It is unattainable to find the perfect solution.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Stefanee, I appreciate you taking the time to your busy schedule to talk to me here this morning.
Sure.
Yeah.
Fought through my baby and my toddler to get here, so.
Tell them I appreciate it.
Yeah, I got it. I'll tell them.
Gotcha. I'm sure they'll know exactly who I am, right?
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you again, and thank you all for tuning in. And this was episode 23. We'll talk to you next time.